what you need to know about new construction and what are the pros and cons of buying a property that is to be built. Welcome to the Real Estate Game Plan Podcast, where we bring you inspiration, actionable steps, and knowledge to build your game plan to take your real estate business to the next level. My name is Demo.
And I'm Derek, and we are licensed real estate brokers and your hosts for this podcast. Let's get started. To be built, custom, do you enjoy answering hundreds of questions? Do you like making a lot of choices? Do you have a vivid imagination? Are you one of those people that you can really look at, for example, a floor plan and really get a good feel for how the home's going to flow? And, maybe it's for you. It certainly can be exciting. Yeah. And when I think about new construction, I think about visiting the beautiful model homes that have been professionally staged, and they have custom curtains, and they probably have all the nicest upgrades and finishes and countertops and all that good stuff. So they really pull you in.
They do. I've actually been to some model properties with clients, and you'll see something like a faux brick wall inside the property, inside the home, and you'll say, "Oh, how much is that to add?" And they'll say, "Actually, that's not available in any of our homes. It's just here in the model." So you do have to be careful sometimes on the model home properties, is that you may fall in love with everything in there, and some of the things may not be available. But that's a couple of the things that we'll talk about today.
Absolutely. Or it may be an upgrade, right? Their availability may be an issue, or it may just be something that's tacked on to that base price, because with new construction, right, you're going to have a base price, and then everything is just going to add on to that.
That's right. So if it's your first day out looking at properties and you are interested in new construction, you may find yourself in that model home looking at the property. You may also find yourself in the sales center at that new construction. And a couple of the things you might see there, if you're unused to it, for the first time, is something called a plat map, which may look way prettier than any other plat map you've ever seen. It's going to have the green grass, and if there is any water on the properties, a blue lake or something like that.
The tennis courts.
It's going to look beautiful. And so what you'll do is end up looking for essentially a lot number. And so they'll be numbered 1 through however many lots there are. And sometimes there are phases even within that individual complex. So you may see this is phase 1. Now we're in phase 2 or 3 or 4. And so that just expands out as they go. But that's kind of your first decision, is which property am I going to purchase to build this property or this home on top of?
Right. And all lots aren't created equal, right? Not only do you have the view to take into account, but I'm sure the price is going to change depending on how many lots have already sold, how far along they are in that community.
If it's cul-de-sac, if it's backs up to the road, if it backs up to the river or whatever's in there, right?
Yeah, all those things are going to come into play.
Yeah, and those are called typically lot premiums, like you'll see that on the adjustment sheet. So that's what that means if you haven't had that explained to you. And then the next thing you're going to do after you said, hey, lot number 12 looks amazing, I think we're going to move forward with this lot, is that now, depending on the builder, you may have between 3 and 20 plans to choose from of how you want that home to look. So that's kind of the second big decision that you're going to make in this process.
Right. And once you've done that, and the next step is going to typically be that sales agent is going to help to construct your purchase and sale agreement.
Yep.
So they will be the ones to prepare that. And one thing that can be a little bit different with new construction contracts, particularly compared to resale, if you've purchased resale, is you don't typically negotiate a whole lot, right, with a builder. It's pretty much this is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know how much room for negotiation is going to be there.
Yeah, there definitely is opportunity for negotiation in the right place. Over the last couple of years, 21, 22 early, not much negotiation. Pre-2021, there was some negotiation, and a lot of times there's the negotiation in what's called the incentive portion of the contract. And that's going to be a lot of times where you may see a builder saying we're offering $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 of incentives to a buyer. Really what that is for your options of lighting, appliances, different things within the property. And so although it's not directly off of the sold price or something like that, it is maybe something that can help you financially. So there is the opportunity for negotiation depending on the builder, the time of year, all of those different things that are going on. And then you have that incentive package where maybe a little bit more of that money comes into play.
Right. And the excitement of a new home, and it certainly is exciting, there's also a pretty good bit of unknown because you will be the first person who has lived there in that property. And there's no guarantee that everything's going to necessarily be perfect. So just because it's a new construction doesn't mean that everything is going to be absolutely perfect later on. And one thing too I think of with new construction demo is the amount of time that it can take. Again, not only are you going to be have a lot more decisions to make, but you're typically going to want to be a little bit more patient. And depending on things like weather, the construction can possibly be delayed.
Yeah, there are a couple of builders out there nationally who can build within 28 days.
Wow.
Which is alarming, really, behind all of the cure rates for concrete and things like that, just to be able to do that. But obviously those type of builders, when they're doing that type of project, it is very limited on the choices, right? Because things need to move really quickly in order to get that built in that many of days. But typically you're going to see anywhere between 6-9 months is probably on the lower end, up to 2 years, depending on the property and right now, supply chain and things like that. So the patience level definitely has to be there, not only through the selections of different things, but also through that build time.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's talk about inspections. So as a buyer, do I have the flexibility to go out and check on the property? Because I'm going to be so tempted because maybe I love making decisions and I have a great imagination and I'm okay waiting 6 to 9 months. I am super excited to be in this new build, but I would love to, ride by and take a look at it, and I'd love to go in it. So can you talk to us a little bit about opportunities for inspections?
Yeah, inspections for sure. You definitely want to have those, and I say those as multiple, to see the property as it's being built. The drive-by is fine. Where you really can run into trouble is being on the property. Obviously, a property that's being built can be full of hazards, not only just nails and screws and things like that on the floor, but a lot of times structural things are happening in that property that aren't maybe really visual to the average person walking on that property. So definitely check in with the builder office anytime you want to access the property. Make sure that everything's clear for you to even be on that property with them. For the inspection side, I do recommend 2 inspections. It may sound odd because you're having 2 in here, but one of those is pretty easy to understand. It's almost like a property you're walking into that's already built, the final walkthrough, right? So before closing, drywall's up, everything's in, and you're testing the property. But the other one that a lot of people miss on new construction is what's called the pre-drywall inspection. As you can imagine, if we were to rip out the drywall in the home you're currently in and see everything that's in there, you may see some things that aren't visible from the drywall, right? Once it's up. So that is the opportunity you actually get with a new construction property, is to make sure that everything inside the walls is as it should be. And so there are plenty of fantastic inspectors who specialize in new construction, and they completely understand what a pre-drywall inspection entails. It is different, obviously. You do not have the dishwasher installed. You do not have the refrigerator and all of those things. You aren't testing those. That's for the final. Right. But the pre-drywall, you're checking all of the systems, making sure the pipes are run correctly. You're able to see a lot. And so it really is to the buyer's advantage to have that separate inspection on a pre-drywall.
Excellent advice. So just piggybacking on inspections a little bit, and that's excellent advice, but the builder will need to obtain certificate of occupancy before we close, right?
Yep.
So how concerned should we be?
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about, this drives back to the contract. The issue here for the buyer is that these contracts are typically written on builder contracts. Depending on the builder, there's going to be certain language in there that they may be able to move the closing date based on things, but you may not be able to. So you do have to always check back with your contract. And that really ties into that certificate of occupancy. So in order for the builder to get the CO from the county or the ordinance they're in building this property, they're going to have certain things in place to be able to pass that so it's habitable for someone to buy the property.
Right.
So they have to do certain things. Typically, if their time frames move, they have the flexibility in the contract a lot of times to move that at no penalty. Sometimes there's a penalty. It's very small. Sometimes there's none. It depends on your contract. But for the buyer, a lot of times you're just along for the ride at that point, and you have to figure out what's going on just by asking questions. But a lot of times there's not much that can be done.
So very builder-friendly contract forms.
Yes.
So speaking of contracts and some of the differences between new construction and resale is going to be a construction deposit, because pretty common, right, for new construction to have a new construction deposit and maybe even also earnest money, which we're used to.
Yeah, you can have a lot of different things depending on the builder. A lot of times that deposit can be really high, depending on which property you chose, what lot you chose, the build time, everything comes into that. Obviously, read your contract, but be prepared, for maybe a touch of shock. And so that may be one of the first things you ask when you start to talk about that property with the representative there of the builder. Is what would we be looking at for a deposit, any earnest money, time frames, total cost, incentives. There's a lot of things that happen in new construction that just aren't relevant to a property that you're going in and purchasing off the street.
And a term I have heard, or a phrase I've heard, and I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about this, is blue tape inspection. What is a blue tape inspection?
Yeah, blue tape walks are pretty common. If you bring it up to the builder, typically, they know what you're talking about. They may not bring it up to you. And really what it is, as the buyer's agent, make sure you schedule some time out that day for you to be involved. And, that is really where the buyer gets a chance before their final signature on this contract to go through and check out any scuff marks, mispaint, anything like that in the property. And so it's called the blue tape walk because most of the time the builder will supply a roll of blue tape, or you can, blue painter's tape. You just go along, tear off a little piece and put it wherever you see those scuff marks, missed paint. Maybe there's a hinge that's off or something like that. Things that are missing in the property, typically in a punch list type fashion, where that builder will come in within a couple days before closing, make sure everything's done. You go back through the property before closing. Okay, everything looks great. And then we move on to the closing.
Awesome. I think I'm a fan of this blue tape walk. And what about warranties? Would you say that it's common or customary that a builder is going to provide a warranty, and any insight you can give us on how good we can expect that to be?
Yeah, definitely check with the builder. This is where reputation of builder really comes into play. If they are an established builder, they've been around for a while, and they're offering a 1-year labor, 10-year systems, different types of warranties are out there. Really check into it. But at least if they're reputable and they've been around a lot, you can maybe think that if you have an issue in that 6 to 9 months or 12 months period of time, that they're going to come back and do what's needed. Sometimes they'll do a 30-day check-in, 30 days after you move in, and they'll have that kind of pre-scheduled with you, where if you see anything in the next 30 days, because that's really where we find out, right? We're moving in. Wait a minute, I didn't lay down on this floor and look up at the ceiling, and over there in the corner, there's a piece of missed tape or drywall that needs to be corrected. Right. And so, keeping a list of those things in that first 30 days, and when it's time for them to come back out for that part, you already have your list. Here are the things we need to get corrected, and they'll make those corrections. Now, obviously, check in with the builder that you have.
And would you recommend, if you are a bit uncertain as to the reputation of the builder, perhaps, maybe doing a little bit of research online, if it's a community that is well established, it's deep into the construction, maybe talking with a couple of the neighbors, maybe just trying to
Yeah.
find out, just so you have a just a little bit more insight. It's always a good thing.
Yeah, definitely speak with the neighbors. Reviews online of builders are, especially large builders, are really bad. And so you almost have to wade through a lot of those, because as soon as one thing happens in a home, or really anywhere, right, these days, typically the first place is to review negatively. So, check Better Business Bureau, make sure they're a reputable builder, check reviews, check portfolios. Maybe they've built in another city near you, but not your city. Drive over to that city and just check out some of their new builds. Is the neighborhood thriving? Do the homes look good? Or are people doing a lot of remodels and you see a lot of roofs being replaced even after a few years? Is there something weird happening there? There's a lot of things you can see in that aspect, but really doing your review. But I will take up for the builders on this, that most builder review sites, or most sites that have reviews of builders, are going to be pretty horrific to read through. You may say, I'm never going to build, but really it's, not to that level for most of the large reputable builders.
Right. Great information to know. And maybe one telltale sign that it's not a large builder is if they don't have their own contract, right? Because I know you mentioned that the builder contracts are heavily builder friendly. They have their own attorneys prepare them. But if they don't have their own contract, that is probably a sign.
Yeah, in Georgia, the GAR contracts, Derek, you do a great job teaching agents about those. That's typically what an agent would write if the builder is maybe a smaller builder,
Right.
And there are new construction forms for that. So that probably is one way. Or they're just a custom builder, right? Maybe they have a crew that they build a few homes all at once, or maybe one at a time, especially if you're in a high luxury type market. They may be building one large home per year, and then moving on to the next project.
Good point. And when it comes to new construction, it's not uncommon for builders to offer incentives if you use their preferred lender or other professionals, for example. And with lending, we always recommend that you shop around. Always a good idea to compare rates and prices, services with at least 2 or 3. And one tip, though, that I'd like to throw out there is if you are a buyer and you have a lender that you've already been working with, and talk to them. They might be able to match that incentive that the builder is offering. So you never know until you ask.
Yep.
But not uncommon for certain incentives or upgrades to be offered if you use their service professionals. So a lot of information here, Demo. Thank you. You were just a treasure trove of info here. Was awesome. And we hope this information has been super helpful for you if you are considering new construction.
You've been listening to the Real Estate Game Plan Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube and leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for listening.